Hello, everybody. This is really awesome. I love being in this space when it's raining and there's all these people in here. This is terrific. And Nate was talking about all the development and the growth and the excitement that people feel in San Diego. And part of what goes through my mind is that I don't want us to forget where we've been and what has led to this point. And so I want to pause today and tell you a little bit about myself and the work that I do and look at some really awesome stuff with you that most people have not seen in a long time and that most people don't even know about. San Diego has a terrific arts and design and architecture history, a rich history that I think you guys will really be interested in. And I'm a native San Diegan. We've been doing a lot of hand raising this morning. So how many folks here are native to San Diego? All right, yeah. A lot of native San Diegans, I like that. So, you know, maybe that helps to be interested in this kind of subject matter. I don't know, it doesn't matter. But we're all here and we're part of this community. And what I do is I just fell into what I do. It's the most terrific thing. I loved mid-century modern design and architecture, as many people do, and I managed to turn that into a gig, which is terrific. I think I've tricked a lot of people. And what I get to do is hang out with old people in their 80s and 70s that did terrific things in San Diego and try to capture their stories and see this city from their perspective and learn about the amazing things that they did. And so, I'll get that. So what we're gonna do is unseal some of the treasure that has to do with San Diego's graphic design history. And I don't know about if there are any graphic designers in the area or any people in that interested in that kind of thing, but I think you guys might like this. So right next door, we have a really great opportunity. All of you folks that are here can visit the exhibition that we have in the Library Art Gallery, which is all about mid-century modern graphic design, and it'll be made available to you after the show, and you can see and we can talk together about some of these objects. And so I think we're going to look at a whole lot of slides right now. When I started to pursue my interest in San Diego mid-century history, I spent a lot of time in archives, and I was down in about 2004, 2005, I was in the library archive at Museum of Contemporary Art, and I came across this very pamphlet, which is a terrific image. I hope you can see that. It's from an art director's annual, so this is an exhibition of basically the cream of the crop of San Diego art directors in 1959. It was summertime, so they have this great image, which is a very kind of art-directed period image of the artist there at his board in an Eames chair in the beach at La Jolla. I mean, it just doesn't get much better than that. So inside the catalog, there's this terrific document which breaks down the entire, in a nutshell, the economy of San Diego's graphic design and art directing at the time. And so it's a little hard to see, but you can see all of the items that were in the show, and you can see the client, and you can see the art director, and you can see the designers and illustrators that worked on all of those pieces. And the thing that I took away from this, which is really amazing and surprising to me, was that half of the jobs, half of these people were working for the defense industry. So this is a critical part of San Diego design history that most people would be surprised to know about. What you can see on here are all these different clients. Convair Public Relations, you've got Roar, you've got all this aerospace action going on. And basically, if you're in the graphic design world now, half of the people that you know, every other person would have been working on a project related to defense or aerospace. So we reproduced that at large scale in the exhibition, and I had people turn up whose names were on that list. And that was really great. People that I didn't even know were in town. One of them is a man named Burt Brockett, and he's a treasure. And I work with a lot of these folks, and I get to study their ephemera, study their records, and it's so gratifying. So I want to think about San Diego in those terms. I mean, it's basically a Navy town. It was a Navy town for a long time, and it still in many ways is. And the big industries, the biggest employer was Convair, which got into the aerospace industry a little bit later. But here's from 1944. If you can imagine that footbridge on Pacific Highway, it's still right there next to that big Port Authority building, covered in camouflage netting. And that's the kind of way it looked during wartime. So two big employers that are kind of unusual, that made a big impact on design in San Diego, were Convair Astronautics and the Navy Electronics Laboratory. And that's a little odd to think of these kind of defense giants, and they were also very high tech. So this is before UCSD, before biotech and all that stuff. San Diego had its own high tech community, and these were some of the contributors. So the Navy Electronics Laboratory in the war had the University of California Division of War Research was housed in a mansion on Point Loma, and it got together with the Navy Sound Laboratory and had this building on Point Loma where a lot of artists worked. They hired people like Dan Dickey and Ethel Green, some of the best artists in San Diego. And here are some other logos that he did. This is for an architect, Henry Hester, at the bottom, and another of the kind of aerospace companies at the top. One of the people that ran the design group at the Navy Electronics Laboratory was an artist named Barney Reed, a really versatile artist. He worked in enamel and pottery and all kinds of things in addition to graphics. You can see one of his pieces here is a leather, sort of a passport case, a case for holding documents, and it's hand-tooled. And here's some of his printed fabrics. He worked with all kinds of other artists and produced fabrics that were marketed and sold. And one of the people that he hired to work at the Navy Electronics Laboratory was a guy named Harry Bertoia that most people don't hear about very much, but he's a really important artist. He was, at the time, had just left the Eames office in Venice, California, where he was working on furniture with Charles and Ray Eames. And he came to San Diego to work at the Navy Electronics Laboratory. When he left San Diego, he produced works like these chairs, which many people know from Knoll Furniture, some of the most interesting design working with welded rod construction. And a lot of the country is aware of Harry Bertoia, and there are lots of people that have put on exhibitions with his work. But in San Diego, most people don't even know that he was here for this time he spent. So for example, there could be exhibitions of a lot of the people that I deal with, but they're still really little known. And so it would be great to see an exhibition of someone like Harry Bertoia in San Diego. It's high time that we had more of that kind of thing. But one of the things that San Diego, we don't seem to be able to preserve the past that well. And so a lot of this is really little known activity. I want to show you some of Jim Sundell's work. He was a career guy who worked at the Navy Electronics Laboratory, and really did some of the coolest graphic design. And I got to know him and meet him before he died. And let's look at some of his work. So here's a brochure from hearing tests that were done at the Del Mar Fair. And what they could do, the Navy could collect data about people's hearing, which is made very obvious by offering these free exams at the fair. And every year they would put them on, and they're doing research on sound and all that kind of stuff. So this was useful for them. But this is where it gets really fascinating to me, is that you get this skill with graphic design integrated with these kind of heavy defense industry stuff. So Undersea Warfare Research and Development Council. Here's a great one: secret computer assistance for Naval Strike Force commanders. These are some of my favorite pieces. And we can see them and talk about them in the room next door, the gallery. Here's an exhibition announcement that he did for a group called the Allied Craftsmen. That group really brought together a lot of San Diego's top quality craftspeople, really interested in modern cutting edge design. They worked in furniture and all kinds of material. And so the graphic designers, Jim Sundell is doing an announcement for one of their exhibitions. He was in that group. Here's a really intimate piece, a birthday card for his wife. You can see that it's hand done, and he did cards like this at every occasion. They're extremely well done, intimate, handmade gestures. Here's another one. This is a bit more generic. Terrific screen printed Christmas card. Christmas cards are a really low-key place where a lot of people could just express themselves without having to have it be a big deal. And they were just the most casual kinds of expression, but they still get into communication, direct communication, which is at the heart of good graphic design. Yeah, there's Gabriel with his horn, a very hippie Gabriel. With the sandals are a nice touch. And this is again from the late 50s, so this is more like a beatnik kind of version. And then here's the colors are beautiful. This is printed on a big sheet of tissue. And so the time that people would spend towards just these simple cards and announcements is something that I think that we have lost in a way today. So with the development and the speed at which we work, there's not the time for things like this that there used to be. This is one of the greatest pieces. This is basically, it accordions out, as you can see, but when it's closed, it's like the shape of an abstract Easter egg. So it's this kind of triangle shape, completely handmade, just cardboard, and there's this sort of trail that you can see. Left, there's this image of movement, and then it says, "I lost my head over you." And happy Easter, sweetheart. And there's a kind of a headless chicken there. So one of the other guys who worked at the Navy Electronics Laboratory for a little while and was a good friend of Jim Sundell and Barney Reed and in the Allied Craftsmen was an artist named Bob Matheny. And Bob is an integral part of the show. He helped me with an awful lot. In addition to the background and the information, he also had a lot of the material in his possession that we're showing. He's a great guy. He's about 87 years old now, and this is what he looked like with his Excelsior press in the late 50s. Bob is really fascinating because he blends the communities. He blends between this kind of industrial graphic design and working for defense industry with also art, the broader art community. He was a sculptor and a painter, and also the education community. So he basically started the art department at Southwestern College in 1961. I hope you can see that well. Can you see that well? I can't from this angle, but this is a great one. This is something that he did before moving to San Diego in Long Beach when he was basically still a student. And he comes to San Diego specifically to work for that company, Convair Astronautics, that we were talking about. So here's a terrific abstraction of a Christmas tree. I mean, that's what it comes down to, right? But it's very colorful, it's very hopeful and fun, as well as thoughtful and abstract. This is another great example of that kind of thing. The suitcases containing all the information is terrific, and this was also done before he came to San Diego. When he moves, here's an example of a change of address card. All of these printed by hand, letterpress, time-consuming kind of work. And he collaborated with other artists. So they had a group called the Patrons of the Private Press, and they managed to call for examples from all over England and the United States, and had a show at the San Diego Museum of Art of all kinds of graphic design from that period that his group arranged. And he came to San Diego specifically to work at Astronautics, which everybody called Astro that worked there. And basically, Astronautics started off making planes. The company was called Convair, and they were down by Lindbergh Field. And they got the commission to work on the first intercontinental ballistic missile. So this is a little odd that we'd be talking about this in the context of graphic design, but obviously they had the resources to hire really top quality designers, and they wanted a modernist image in their graphics, in their architecture. They're dealing with science, they're dealing with research, they're really on the cutting edge, and they were hugely important to San Diego. So they built a new facility, a new plant in 1958, which is just a terrific building. Some of these photographs are taken by Julius Schulman, who's one of the top, best known on the West Coast architectural photographers. And there's such a wealth of this kind of great history in San Diego that we just seem to have lost. Why? There could be shows of Julius Schulman's work, as well as Harry Bertoia, all that kind of thing. There's the interior of Convair Astronautics, this terrific suspended stairway. They spared no expense, these incredible panes of glass. And yet what they're working on is a bomb. The whole place was put together to work on an intercontinental ballistic missile. And the launch system, the great thing about that, yeah, you can see how much he digs it. With the Atlas missile, with that launch system, they are able to put people into orbit. They're able to do, it's one of the major launch vehicles in the entire space race. It's really a big deal. I spoke to a guy just the other day who was part of this. He was one of the first art people that they hired in the art department. He left his job in Phoenix and came out here, and he said he lied his way in specifically to be in on what was happening at Astro. It was really compelling to people, and they had a number of significant firsts. All of those astronauts that we hear about with the recent passing of John Glenn and everybody, they were all here. That's them at the facility on Kearny Mesa, which has been demolished. And this is inside the art section. This was the domain of a guy named Stan Hodge, who taught most of those people that we were talking about earlier, Bob Matheny and Jim Sundell. They were Hodge's students from up in Long Beach and Los Angeles. And we have later, only through putting this exhibition on, and the people that came out of the woodwork that I've got to know, I've been learning these other parts of the mystery. So I borrowed this, Kara and I borrowed this image from the San Diego Air and Space Museum without knowing that this is the back of a man named Tom Suzuki, and that this is a guy named George Sanders, who is a very talented illustrator. And I'm learning more bits and parts of this puzzle as we go with every step. It's really fun to be part of this. So you can see on the wall, they've got examples of their own work. The posters were something, they were in charge of graphics, the sort of interior design of the plant, and posters and all kinds of signage. You can see he's got all his working materials and his smokes there, pencil sharpener at the ready. And here's an example of some of the signs in use. Just commonplace, but really somewhere where they got to combine the limits of the industry that they're in with a lot of creativity, more creativity than I would have realized. Here's an example of that kind of thing. I mean, this is just workplace safety stuff, day-to-day stuff to go up on the walls, but really thoughtful and really intellectual, and the way they've conveying these messages so clearly with that humorous tone. That's this man, Stan Hodge. That's his mind at work and the people that he was art directing. Wonderful stuff. So there could be a whole exhibition just of Stan Hodge work. Instead, no one even knows where all these posters are. There's a handful of papers that Stan Hodge gave to the San Diego Air and Space Museum, but this is the kind of paradox of San Diego, is that we really don't hang on to our past the way we ought to and celebrate it. So along with the growth and with the excitement and with everything that we're part of now, I really think we could do a better job of keeping track of this. And I can't tell you how many people have seen the work in the exhibition and seen these examples up close and felt like, man, I need to do a little bit better of this. I could do better at these cards, and I really, it's really inspiring, I think. And then there's this side, which is the reality of the time. And it's so funny because it's so reminiscent of what's happening right now. I mean, growing up in the 80s, I thought the Cold War was over. And with everything happening now, I guess it's not. So here's a great, great example. I just love this industrial security division idea with the lock and the text up there. This is one of Bob Matheny's pieces that he did. He was only at astronautics for a couple of years when he first moved to town, working with Stan Hodge, and I want to show you some more of his terrific pieces. I love the keyboard, the stenography handbook. By the way, this is printed on like a cover stock, like a gray vinyl, textured vinyl cover stock. Applied Mathematics, another of Bob's samples that he kept for so long. Centaur came along after the Atlas missile. That was another booster system that they developed that was a big deal. Beautiful. One of the things that a lot of these companies did that were working with aerospace is they have all these incredible industrial shapes, and so they could use them as beautiful abstractions, which this picture hints at in the background. I mean, that's just a terrific image. And also the way it goes with the text, it's captured, it's held in place there. And I love that little detail that it's for the captive test plan. Beautiful, beautiful design work. One of the special things that I want to take a minute to show you that is part of this kind of mystery that I get to work with was this deck of cards. And as I was working on this project, Bob, my friend, and another designer that I was talking with in Central California, they said, "Oh, do you know about these cards the Astro cards. And so they sent me these packs of playing cards. And I've been learning more and more about them as time has gone on. In the process, I put them in the show, and as a result have gotten all kinds of great information. They're so cool. It turns out that they were the special brainchild of that guy, Bert Brockett, who you saw in the slide earlier. And he managed to get the higher-ups at General Dynamics to invest in making this set of playing cards, and they used about 7 of the in-house artists to do series that dealt with, one series dealt with the corporate structure, one series dealt with flight and the history of flight, and they're just terrific images. And I mean, I love that. So this is really fun stuff that that could be more part of our history. Part of what I've gotten to do is learn about all this and share it with you with exhibitions like We'll Go and See. And to see the stuff firsthand is really a joy. I'm the kind of person who loves ephemera and the texture of paper, and so that's a real joy. When I described this project to Bob, the artist who you saw his photo, I asked if he might go back to his old letterpress days and work with me to do an announcement. And so he designed and we printed, this is just a debossed print. But the first, for the show, he came up with this announcement, and we printed them. And the first thing that he wanted to do is he said, we've got to find these seals. And that red notary seal. So what people, it had a big splash at a certain point in time, and everybody was using them, and they went from something that you would seal an envelope with or seal pieces of paper together. It moved from that practical purpose to simply being a design element, which is something that we decided to capture and use in the show because of Bob's enthusiasm for the seal. And then when I got into contact with Bert Brockett, and he began to tell me about those space cards, and we're getting to the bottom of that whole mystery. And he said, Dave, I'm going to bring something in, and I'm going to leave it for you at the desk. Those space cards won a special prize in another art director's annual, one of these competitive exhibitions in Los Angeles, the best, advertising and editorial art in the West kind of show. And the deck of cards won a special certificate of merit. And when he left it for me, of course, its emblem was just that big seal. The thing that Bob had first thought of, the thing that is a key to unsealing this mystery, and there was the seal, the main thing used to decorate his certificate. So that was a joy, and kind of closed that loop with the seals. One of the thoughts that I find really interesting about all this is the way that art and design is neutral. I mean, I, like a lot of people, tend to have this version of thinking of artists as mostly liberal, mostly kind of bohemian. And indeed, a lot of the designers who worked for the Navy or worked for Convair were pacifists. So I have examples in the exhibition of them calling for banning of nuclear weapons and not killing people, and these pacifist messages. But art itself, design itself, is completely neutral. And I like the idea that here are these guys, the last major contract that General Dynamics had in San Diego after the Atlas missile and the Centaur was the Tomahawk cruise missile. So that's something that I remember growing up here. And it's just a bomb, and its only purpose is to destroy life and property. But we're going to give it pinstripes. I mean, these guys, the shape of it is so seductive. The shape of the planes, the shape of drones, they're very seductive, they're very attractive, very interesting. But, you know, the idea that they're going to carefully plan out these decorations for the bomb is really interesting. And something I think to think about. Obviously, art can be used for anything. On a day like this, when I feel like on the other side of the country, there's a lot that might be questionable taking place for the arts, for the future of the arts. I think this is a good time to think about things like that. I'm really glad that we get to share and come together for something positive, as Nate was talking about earlier, and something that reinforces community and creativity in the face of what's happening on the other side of the country. But this is really a strange image. I mean, to me, I see that incredible lobby. So this is the same, you know, beautiful buildings we were looking at, those incredible glass windows. Here's the 70s. I like the videographer guy, too. He's got a good look. But you know, the idea that we decorate everything, whether it's, even if it's just going to blow up, that we have to decorate it. We have to give it that touch. We can't let it alone. Can't let it just go out as a bomb.